South African State Power Utility Eskom's CEO Ruyter Resigns has resigned. Now, the company announced this on Wednesday, and he marks the 11th boss to have left the company in just over a decade. Saddled with creaking coal-fired power stations and a mountain of debts, Eskom has struggled for years to meet electricity demand in Africa's most industrialized country. But that wasn't always the case. Eskom was once one of the world's leading electricity companies. It was so successful that it was supplying more than half the electricity in Africa by the end of 1990. Fast forward to 2022. Load shedding hit the highest level ever, stage 6, and could hit stage 7. The record power cuts have led to public frustration, crippled businesses, and prompted calls for resignations at Eskom, with some accusing the CEO of governmental sabotage. As Eskom looks for a replacement, his departure puts further pressure on the power utility. Joining me from Johannesburg, South Africa is Ted Blom, energy expert. Ted, welcome again to Business Edge. Thank you for joining me today.
Great to you.
I don't know if you would say that his resignation came as a surprise, considering the amount of pressure and public backlash he's faced in recent times, but he leaves just days before he would have marked 3 years at the helm of affairs for Eskom. So what did Ruyter Resigns come into Eskom to do 3 years ago?
Well, he came in and was appointed as a turnaround specialist, and his mandate was to increase the megawatt hours available from the utility. They had load shedding in 2019, just prior to his announcement of his appointment. The fact of the matter is we're now 3 years down the road, and the utility is now at its lowest energy availability factor in a 100-year history. And in fact, he's decimated the output of the utility, and the costs have run through the roof, and he has not made a dent. In fact, he's been better at catching people buying expensive milk and brooms than he has at actually improving the performance of the utility. So in my terminology, I call it the 3 wasted years. He came in as a novice with no experience. I complained about that at the time of his appointment, and he leaves us now, and we're in a far worse situation than we were at the time. So I'm actually quite glad that this change is now happening, because it's time to get a proper engineer in who's got proper qualifications and proper experience in the utility industry, and to go forward. We can't carry on with a guy that walked away from 85% of his coal generation assets in view of and chasing renewable assets with a promise that have an energy availability factor of below 20%. Coal's average availability is above 80% when it's managed correctly. So you're talking about cheese and apples. So yeah, I don't think it's a loss for us. I think it's actually a gain, provided we now take the opportunity and learn a lesson and appoint somebody who's properly qualified.
So let me pick up from that in terms of learn the lesson. So before he came in, between 2007 and 2020, Eskom had about 13 CEOs, interim CEOs, and acting CEOs. That's a very high turnover at such a very high level of management and decision making. And some have asked, is the problem really with the selection and the choice of the CEOs, or is it an Eskom problem itself? So if you say that he's a novice, he came in as a turnaround specialist, and in 3 years he's left Eskom worse off than it was, but he was selected. There were people who chose him. So is it really an issue of the CEOs or something far greater than that?
Okay, so 2 things. Firstly, Eskom has been politicized since the shares were stolen by the government. It was an independent organization prior to 2001. 2001, the ANC passed a bill through Parliament converting Eskom into a state-owned entity. And then since then, the government of the day has been appointing the leadership of Eskom. They filled it full of catered appointment, and not everybody that was appointed were capable or qualified to run the organization. And certainly during the state capture years, most of the appointees were appointed so that they can turn a blind eye to the stealing and capturing that was going on in Eskom. So I'd say more than half of the people that were appointed in the last 10 years or so were incompetent or were political appointees and weren't appointed on merit. And even some of those that were appointed on merit succumbed to the pressure of politics and ended up feathering the government's nest rather than looking after the interests of industry and the public.
So now beyond that, there are those who are happy about his resignation and those who say that he wasn't given as much support as he should have. And you talked about his maybe incompetence and the failure, was there nothing that he did at his time as CEO that could have helped to put Eskom on the right path, back to the path of sustainability and profitability, even though it's been a very long time since the company has seen those two words in their annual reports?
Well, I think he's had ample opportunity, and he had the funds to do the refurbishment. He then chose to grab the glamour and the limelight by repaying early 82 billion rands worth of debt, which would have gone a long way to sorting out the refurbishment and the technical issues within the company. So I think he missed the opportunity, he missed the ball. Why? Because he was a political appointee. He came in through the back door. Other candidates were candidates at the time, were far better qualified than him, but yet the politicians thought that he is an easy man to dictate to, and that's why they succumbed to him. And he lived by the sword, he was appointed by the sword, and he died by the sword.
So you mentioned politicians. Let's get to them now. His resignation follows an attack on Eskom and his management by the Mineral Resources and Energy Minister, who said that Eskom was attempting to overthrow the government by failing to end load shedding, which actually started over 15 years ago. He also faced, of course, outrage, public scrutiny. But the presidents, Cyril Ramaphosa in recent times, as well as the Public Enterprises Minister, have both failed to publicly support him. So was it a situation of his position itself becoming untenable? It was either he resigns or that hammer was coming down sometime soon.
Well, it's wider than that. He also lost the support of his board over the last 3 months. I believe that they kept him in isolation, held meetings behind his back, and didn't pass crucial documents or that he'd asked for approval. So yes, I think, if you live by politics, you die by politics. The fact of the matter is he wasn't capable, he wasn't competent, he was found out, he was found short, and the bottom line is that that was the end of the day for him.
So what happens to the promises he made? We know that the Eskom board confirmed that there was a comprehensive executive search that would be conducted to find a suitably qualified candidate. But do you think of course, there is somebody out there, but given how things have gone in recent times, how do you think all of this will play out? And how will his resignation affect things at Eskom as it is right now?
I don't think it's going to affect Eskom at all. I think the organisation has got enough momentum to carry on. And they will find a successor, and hopefully they use the right measurement and criteria this time, rather than appoint a political stooge.
What happens next for Eskom? South Africans have hit stage 6, some might even hit stage 7 anytime soon. Ted, take us through what the advanced load shedding has been like for South Africans and South African businesses.
Well, we're sitting with between 8 and 10 hours a day load shedding. And if nothing is done, we'll go to 12 hours or more of load shedding. And that is disastrous for the economy. We're losing thousands and thousands of jobs, and we're losing thousands and thousands of businesses. It's just totally untenable. I'm afraid I need to be asked to be excused. I need to move on.
Okay. All right, Ted Blom, thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
All right. So it is, of course, a developing story right now where we have the resignation of Eskom's CEO that was announced publicly yesterday. It does seem that, given the statement release, he will stay for some 30 days as the power utility attempts to find a replacement. I do believe it's the board chair possibly that might stand in for him during the time that the company is looking for his replacement. But we have to also realize there's a lot more happening here than Andre de Ruyter himself. There have been some 13 CEOs in the past, give or take 13 years. And as Ted has said, it's really a political issue. So is there political will to fix Eskom? That's one of the biggest questions, because if you replace him, the next person comes, will the next person have the necessary support? Eskom has asked for a replacement of its aging coal fleet, meaning that breakdowns will increase. It said that if maintenance can also not be postponed, otherwise load shedding will possibly hit stage 7 and 8 as well. But it seems the government has been dragging its feet on fixing additional generation capacity and much more. But when you look back in time, it's something to behold. As I said earlier, at one point in time, Eskom was responsible for providing almost half the electricity across the continent, particularly in the southern part of the continent, in 1990. In fact, in its report in 1994, its annual report, Eskom said that it was the world's lowest cost producer of electricity. And many people continue to wonder how things have gone downhill from there. South Africans and South Africa's economy has been facing load shedding for over 15 years. There are 8 stages of load shedding. This year, it's gone to the worst, and there's potential that between now and the coming days and weeks, it might hit 7 or stage 8 as well. We'll keep an eye on this. The next person who comes in as Eskom CEO faces a battle ahead of him. Can that person come in? Should it be an engineer? Does this continue to be a political football arena for the government to put in someone who is favorable to them or someone who can really get the job done? And that's as much as we can take on this edition of Business Edge. Don't forget to follow us on social media. We are at News Central TV. Also head to our website, www.newscentral.africa, and download our mobile app on Play Store and App Store. Till next time, I'm Tolulope Adeleru-Balogun.